What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Andy Storch Show. I am your host, Andy Storch. And of course, this is a show where we can come together to starve our fears, to follow our dreams, and to pursue fulfilling our true potential. And I have a true friend and brother in this race, if you will, to get the most out of life on the show with me today, my good friend, Mike Flynn. And if you don't know Mike is a husband, a father, a podcaster, a writer, a speaker, financial advisor, and now a best-selling author of the book Master the Key, which I just finished reading and thoroughly enjoyed. He's also the host of the popular Impact Entrepreneur Show that has been inspiring entrepreneurs and tons of listeners since April 2016, I think. Is that right, Mike?
2016? Yeah, 2016. I think I launched April 4/11 on 2016. Yeah, 3 years.
I was looking it up and going back to your first episode in my limited research for this. And of course, I should have looked up when you were last on my show. This is your second time on. You were on when it was the Entrepreneur Hot Seat, probably close to 2 years ago, sometime in 2017, after we were introduced by Nick DiNardo. And I loved everything you were doing, and just thought if I could just do half of what Mike is doing, then I'll be pretty successful.
Oh man, and you're crushing it right now as well. So congratulations. I mean.
Thank you. Just following you, man. And we're just trying to do all the, and I know at that time you had all this stuff in your head that you were working on, and it seemed like so many opportunities in different directions. And I know what that feels like. And it's hard to actually sit down and focus and execute on, whether it's writing a book or, creating something else. But you did it. And this book is not just like, oh, I sat down and put down my thoughts in a book like a lot of people do. This book is an absolute work of art, my friend. It is so incredible what you did with it. I mean, I am just seriously in awe, shock and awe. So tell me about how the book came about, and we'll get into a little bit for, people that haven't read it. But it's an awesome book.
Well, first of all, I love the tagline for your show, Starve Your Fears. And the idea of fear is interesting. Because it represents a dichotomy of two things that we experience. One is this confrontation with our current reality, our current state in life.
Yep.
And comparing that to what we think that we want, and then trying to reconcile that with what it's going to cost us to get there. And so that fear is that great chasm of cost, of effort, of time, energy, money, relationships, sacrifice, failure, setbacks,
and judgment. Let's not forget judgment, which is the thing we fear the most. We're going to put this out there, and people are going to go, well, that was stupid, Mike.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I think that, whenever you start something, you have to, or you're trying to crystallize what to do, you have to really think about who you're doing it for. And so you're right. When we first talked a couple of years ago, I had been giving these keynote presentations to organizations on the idea of peak performance. And at that time, peaks, the acronym PEAK I created stands for position, engagement, action, and kinetic, which I then kind of took those and put them in a kind of a more narrative type format: story, gifts, action, and community in the book, which we'll talk about in a second. But, there were a lot of opportunities, a lot of things coming my way. And I didn't know how to tackle them all, which I should tackle first, how to approach it, and how to manage all of the opportunities within the limited amount of time that we had.
Yeah, not to mention you have a main business, right? You've got a wife and 4 kids. You are a committed husband and father. I know you, and I follow your life, like me. So we have a limited amount of hours to work with, and then a big network. So that means tons of opportunities always coming your way. And
totally.
Focused on what you do.
Yeah, and I don't like telling people no.
Right. Same here.
I love helping people. I love, serving people because I want to give that which I desire for myself. Right.
Right.
So if I desire to have people help me, then I'm going to do my best to help people. And I think, there's this, just let's riff on that for a second. There's this idea in the world right now, in the entrepreneurial world, that when someone reaches out to you and says, hey, how can I help you? That is like, there's some entrepreneurs who take that question like an insult. And I'm like, how arrogant is that?
Yeah.
Somebody is asking you how they can help you. They're trying to say, that they want to offer something to you. And maybe they don't know exactly how to do it yet, but you should honor their generosity and maybe.
I just think it's a challenge. It's an awkward question when you don't know each other that well. Like if someone you don't really know, just how can I help you? And then you're like, well, I don't know. I could ask you to, I don't know, buy my book and promote my book or something, but I don't know you well enough to do that. So then it's a little bit.
But how long does it? How do you build? It's all about building a relationship, right?
Right.
I mean, and so good for that person for stepping out there and being awkward.
Yeah.
Shame on the entrepreneur who disses that person. It's like when you go to imagine when you were like courting Courtney, right? Imagine if you're like, hey, whatever your pickup line was, and then she disses you, right?
I think ahead of the
and she goes, I don't even know you.
Right.
Instead, like you're right. There is a better way of doing it.
Yeah.
But we could all respond by just simply saying, I don't know you, Joe Schmo. Tell me about yourself,
Yeah.
Or teach them how to ask a better question. We've given into this myth that there's not enough time. And so we respond to each other in such a harsh way where we don't honor the humanity of the other person.
Yeah. And it's really getting to know them. And that's where I adjust it. And my line is usually, well, I'd love to spend some time to get to know you so I can figure out if there's a way that I can help you or that we can help each other. Because sometimes you meet someone and you start talking, you're like, oh my gosh, we have so much in common. I have so many connections. I know we can help each other. And sometimes you talk to somebody and you're like, I have no idea what you're doing and I have no idea how I can help you, but let's talk more and keep in touch.
Well, an example for me where this happened was there was somebody who I don't know super well, but we've collaborated on projects together, and I know that this person has something coming up, and I reached out to them and I said, hey, how can I help you? I mean, we've collaborated. He knows me. He knows I have a podcast. He knows I've written for some, Thrive Global and other things. And he's like, I have no idea. No. And I'm like, okay, well, fine. If you don't want to put in the extra, I don't know unless you tell me what you're struggling with.
Yeah.
I don't know. So it's like this give and take. It's this give and receive kind of a thing. And
people don't like asking for help though. So even if someone offers them help, if you take them up on it and say, well, I really could use help with this. I mean, you're essentially showing weakness, right? That, well, I do need help. I can't do it all on my own.
Yes.
And so sometimes it might be better to specifically find something where you can proactively help them. And I just think as an example, how we came together was from our mutual friend, Nick DiNardo, who, when I started my podcast in 2017, he mentored me through the whole process because he had 2 podcasts at the time and made 5 introductions for me, including you. He was very proactive in helping me, such a generous, helpful guy. And so I'm like, I don't want to say forever in his debt, but if he ever needs anything, I'm 100% going to jump on the chance to help him because he was always
totally
me.
100%. Well, let me help your listeners with one thing right now. And that's how I've managed to do a lot of things with the same amount of time that we all have.
Yeah.
And we all have 168 hours in a 7-day week. And I pretty much know where every single one of those hours is because I did an audit and I created a spreadsheet. And this was an idea that was gifted to me by another friend named Tony Grebmeyer, who's an awesome guy, has a podcast called the Be Fulfilled Show. And he is a very successful entrepreneur out of Denver, Colorado. But, when I inventoried my time, I discovered just how much time I had. we sleep about 55 hours a week, 53, 54, 55, somewhere around there,
Yep.
hours a week. And then the rest of that means that we have, 110-ish hours left.
Yeah.
And let's say 40 of those, if you're using the typical work week, if you're working from a 9 to 5 type job, are at work.
Yeah.
That means you have 60-ish hours left, right?
Yep.
And let's say you're going to spend, um, you know, let's say you're going to spend out of those 60 hours left, let's say you're going to spend 50 of them being present to your family in different ways. That
Be nice.
leaves 10 hours. That leaves 10 hours. So there's 5 days in a week. So you have an hour of me time every day to go to the gym
Yep.
during the week. And then you have 5 hours to work on your passion project, right? And if you are in a married relationship or a relationship where other people are depending on you, if you guys collaborate and bring that 168 hours into each other's frame of mind and get each other on the same page, it's going to create freedom for you to pursue things that you never thought you were going to be able to pursue. And that's the only reason that I've been able to do the things that I'm doing, is to get my wife, Lisa, on the same sheet of music as me, and what we're creating, what we're building. Otherwise, it would be a constant cause of friction.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you saying that, because that is so important. There's really two important things there. One is the time, something I talk about all the time, that every time, all the things we do are choices, and it's based on priorities. And just yesterday, I had a conversation with a guy that I casually know in the neighborhood, and we were talking about going to the gym. And he said, well, I just don't have time. And I said, what do you mean you don't have time? And I know you just started the new job. Is that requiring a lot? And he said, no, it's about 40 hours a week, but I've got this commute. It's a half an hour each way. And I'm thinking, there's still a lot of hours left in the week, bro.
Yeah, totally.
And he's like, well, and I also like to relax. And I was like, oh, you like to relax. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
that's your choice, but don't say you don't have time to work on these other things or go to the gym. That's your choice.
Right. I mean, and I actually think that if you want to prove to yourself what you are capable of doing, and if you think that you feel inside you that you have something great that you're capable of doing, then the fastest way to access that greatness is by doing something that's physically challenging,
Hmm.
and watching yourself overcome it. Because when you do that, it's actually it's actually proven in science as well, that the neurological relationship between doing a hard physical task and overcoming it, and it forming new neurological pathways and releasing all kinds of chemicals, and dopamine and serotonin, all of this stuff. It's this reward system. So when you do a hard thing, you overcome it, then you are able to tackle new things. So you're going to see, Andy goes to the YMCA, and he deadlifts 225 5 times, and he does it successful, and he's like, huh, cool. I did that. I surprised myself. I didn't die. My back is still in place. And now I'm going to go to my office, and I'm going to go crush a sales call, because I just did something that I thought I couldn't do, and I did it. And now I have this new belief in myself that I'm going to go make this scary phone call, or I'm going to go start this brainstorming this conference with my business partner, and look what you've created,
Yeah, it's true. I mean, and they say it doesn't even have, I agree that, like, I feel so much accomplishment from doing something more strenuous, like going to the gym. But there's a lot of people out there that say just accomplish something. So there's a big movement on make your bed first thing in the morning, right? Because it gives you that sense of accomplishment. They're like, hey, I've started the day accomplishing something. Let's move on and see what else I can do. And I always talk about how important it is to start the day intentionally by getting up earlier than you need to and doing some things, whether it's meditation, reading, writing, exercise, passion project, or all of those things. But if you schedule the time, you want to write a book. I haven't written a book. It seems still like a huge undertaking to me, but I know how I would do it, which is I would schedule an hour every morning or whatever, and I would work on it then, instead of just like hoping that it fits in somewhere in the day.
Yeah. My writing process was every Friday morning. I would well, almost every morning actually, but I would really write the longest on Friday mornings. But I would get up early. I would have my prayer meditation time. My routine stayed the same. The only difference is that on after I dropped my kids off at school, I would go to this chapel. I'm Catholic, and there's this chapel that's attached to our parish that has something called adoration in it, where this is not a religious podcast, so I won't go into the details of what that is, but it's an opportunity for me to just connect with God in a deep and intimate way. And I would visualize the book. I would visualize the scene. I would take the characters, and I would do it so deeply that I would actually get emotional. Like when Chaz, who the violin player in the book, when she loses her violin, right? Like that scene when she learns what happened, and and I'm not going to tell people, I don't want to spoil it, but when she loses that, I saw that in my mind. I felt it, right? And so when I would leave the chapel, I would go write, and I would take that emotion, because writing is emotional. Unless you're writing a textbook, writing is emotional. Like, this is a fictional story that will lead readers to the truth that dwells within them, and the truth is emotional, and it requires our action. And so that's the process. And then I wouldn't edit. I wouldn't edit. I would just write, and I would leave the editing to the professional editors who are going to take the critical eye. They're going to restructure things. They're going to use their gifts to help reshape the story and structure the story. But if we and it's a really important lesson in life, that if you're editing along the way, it's going to slow down the process. You're not going to capture the magic, and you'll miss out on opportunities. And there's a whole scientific system around that, around the psychology of chance and randomness and chaos, and not editing along the way and looking for those glimmers of magic.
Well, I've heard that is absolutely the way to go, that it's important to just kind of let it flow and then worry about editing it later, whether you do it yourself or you leave it up to the professionals. So I think it's really cool that you did that. I'm curious where all this came from, because you talked about visualizations a little bit. For people that haven't read the book, aren't familiar yet, it's a parable, which means it's a story with fictional characters. You're essentially teaching lessons through this story. Many people write personal development books, or they're teaching you lessons, and sometimes they use stories from their own life. I'm lucky if they're actually interesting, because I learn best through examples. So I always want those. And you've provided this very entertaining and interesting story about these 4 or 5 characters, with one central character who's going through, a tumultuous, pivotal time in his life, and trying to figure out where he goes from here, which is something we've all done, right? And so where did all this come from, and how much of it is drawn from your own life versus others that you talk to?
Yeah, so the main character is a guy named Steve, and he's a financial advisor going through a really rough time. And his story in the book is loosely drawn from my own. I did deal with the brutal effects during and after of the financial crisis, but I didn't almost die like the character Steve does.
Right.
But the rest of the characters are kind of a combination of a bunch of different people that I've met throughout my life. So the character Chaz in the book, who's the orphaned violinist, she is a combination of 2 real people. One is a guy by the name of David Arbin, who was a Holocaust survivor, virtuoso violin player, and he was the conductor for the Philadelphia Orchestra, I believe, or the Philadelphia Conservatory of Music, some major music organization. And one of his mentees, a local gal here in Santa Cruz named Rebecca Jackson, who's a Juilliard trained violinist. She's the one who introduced me to his story. And so I took her story and his story and I smashed them together, and I created this character named Chaz Cho. And then the character Fidel is actually based on an Uber driver that I met. So I went to a conference a few years ago in 2016, 2017, I can't remember. And it was a speakers conference. It was the first non-financial services conference that I had attended. And so I was there by myself. So I decided I'm going to do everything different. I'm going to sit in the very front row of every session. I'm going to sit in the front seat of all of my Lyft or Uber drivers. And so on the way back from Colorado Springs to Denver, I sat in the front seat of this Uber driver, and his name was Fidel, and he was a Cuban refugee. And he literally did flee Cuba from the west coast of Cuba and landed in Mexico. And most of the story that you read in the book is actually true. It really did happen. And then the executive coach at the end is based on a number of people, but one of the main people that character is based on is a guy by the name of Dr. Jim Ephraim, who's a sports psychologist. And so that, you're drawing on real experiences, and you're teaching these principles of owning your story, of owning your gifts, of owning your action, and owning your community, because those are really the four fundamental questions that we all face in life and that hold us back. Who am I? What's my story? How do I show up in the world? What are my gifts? What do I do when I get there? What kind of action do I take? And who do I do it with? Community, right? And we often make the mistake of jumping into the community piece too fast, because community is the ultimate accelerant for growth. And we all know that is the highway to achievement, right? Is through doing it with communities. But if we don't know ourselves and our story, which then influences how we perceive our gifts, which then influences how we take action, then we may end up in the wrong community.
Yeah. Or the community just can't help us. Going back to our early conversation about the importance of offering help and asking for help. I've been in a situation in the past where I had a community that wanted to help me, but I didn't know what I wanted, and they couldn't help me. When I was graduating from business school at USC in LA, I started reaching out to alumni in the network to ask for advice and informational interviews. And almost 100% of people said yes. They were very helpful. And then it was like, okay, well, what do you want help with? And I'm like, well, I don't really know what I want to do. And then they didn't know how to help me because I didn't know who I was and what I wanted. Now I'm much more clear on that 12 years later. But at the time, I didn't have that clarity.
Mm-hmm. I think that the who am I question boils down to what Dr. Albert Bandura, who's a famous psychologist, refers to as self-efficacy. We all want to feel effective and powerful. And when we face challenges, when we face adversity, when we've experienced failures or setbacks, we feel ineffective. We feel not powerful. And therefore, when we face future challenges, we ask ourselves the question, can I do this hard thing? And oftentimes, we're not willing to journey through that cost that we started talking about earlier at the beginning of this. We're not willing to put in the time, the effort, the energy, the sacrifice, the judgment, all of that stuff, because when we ask ourselves, can I do a hard thing? We say no because of X, Y, or Z. And so that becomes our identity. That becomes how we answer the question, who am I? Right? I am a failure. I am not capable. I am fill in the blank, right? What if you began to change the conversation? What if you began to ask the question, can I do hard things? And then say, I am capable of doing hard things. And then add to that, I am worthy of doing hard things. We are all worthy. One of the most important things that we can tell ourselves in order to really answer that question, who am I, is I am worthy, first and foremost.
Yeah.
I am worthy of the hard things I've experienced. They've made me who I am. They've equipped me to do the work I'm doing now. The financial crisis, the actual financial crisis, my health and physical crisis, the spiritual crises that I've experienced, the broken relationships, all of it has happened for me and equipped me. Guess what, though? The only reason I know that to be true is because I've made the conscious decision to choose to look at it that way.
Yep.
And we all have that opportunity.
Yeah, I've said this even on this podcast recently, that it's okay to aspire for great things, and I like what you say there, because you're worthy of where you are now, and you're worthy of what you want to achieve, and you have the capabilities and probably the community that can support you, and that we've all made mistakes in the past, and that's part of our journey. We can sit around regretting those things, which doesn't help us at all, or we can accept that, hey, that's part of our journey. That's part of what got me to where I am at this moment, which is where I need to be to go out and do the things that I want to do.
When you were living in California, did you ever experience an earthquake?
A couple really minor ones, but nothing big.
Yeah. So in 1989, we had the Loma Prieta earthquake here. It was a 7.1.
Yeah, the famous World Series earthquake.
Yeah. I was 10 years old, and it's all my fault. I disobeyed my mother and opened a bag of Dorito chips that she told me not to, and then the earth started shaking instantaneously. So there's some good Irish Catholic guilt there for you. But I bring that up because obviously earthquakes are startling, right? They are disorienting. They are frightening. But one of the I believe there's clues all around us in nature that reveal what we're capable of. And when there's an earthquake, an actual earthquake, most often there's a deposit of gold instantaneously made in the earth because of the friction and the water and all of that stuff, right? But we would never know that unless we actually went down and mined it and explored the after effects of that earthquake and all of that stuff, right? It's the same in life. It's the same in life. When we experience earthquakes in life, they are startling. They are disorienting. They are frightening, but there is oftentimes a deposit of gold instantaneously made in the depths of our soul. And unless you and I take time to go and do the work to reflect, to bend back time, to direct light or heat onto that thing, then we'll never know what exists there. And instead, it'll just feel like a weight.
Well, there might be people listening who are kind of nodding their head and saying, like, okay, I get that. How do I know who I am and what my strengths are, my superpowers are, what that gold is, and how to show up and where to go?
Well, you have to, going back to the fundamental thing is, you have to prove to yourself, and nobody else can do this for you. You have to prove to yourself that you are effective. You have to prove to yourself that you can do hard things. I mean, there is no substitute for that. You have to go do something physically that taxes you mentally. That almost not only taxes you mentally and physically, but also a little bit emotionally. That's one of the reasons why I do, this is probably going to be like, I do CrossFit. This is the CrossFit talk right here. That's one of the reasons why I do CrossFit, because it is hard. And every time I come out of that, I'm more effective because I did something challenging. And you get to a certain point where you've done something so often that's been challenging that it becomes a new comfort level. and then you start to coast. And now I'm at a point where I'm thinking like, I need to step up my game again and get more fully invested to do hard things, because I'm feeling a little bit stagnant, you know?
Yeah, or really either hard things or really scary things, I think, right? You take a chance
Yeah.
and do something really scary. Like you mentioned, I'm putting on this conference. I don't know how the hell I'm going to pull this off, but I have a lot of resources and community and I'm asking for a lot of help, and it's scary, but it's where I'm growing. And I think doing really hard things or going through really difficult times. I interviewed Sean Akinosi recently, who is the founder of Akinosi Chocolate. Really fascinating story. And I asked him about finding yourself, and he said you do it through heartbreak, that you need to experience some heartbreak or tragedy, and that's where people truly end up finding themselves.
Yeah. But they're really, I mean, doing hard things or scary things, things that tax you and mentally and emotionally. And the reason that is, and let me ask you this question, is going back to the physical element, right?
Yeah.
Or even to the event, the upcoming talent development think tank, right?
Yeah.
If you did not, this is scary. You just brought it up. It's scary. You
Yeah.
don't know how you do it. You've never done it before.
Right.
There's all kinds of logistics. If you just winged it, what would be guaranteed?
Well, it probably wouldn't go well. I don't know. It wouldn't go
And
as well as it could.
what would that do to you?
It probably wouldn't make me look very good. It wouldn't. It might help. I might feel embarrassed.
Right.
Yeah.
And that would become part of your self-talk, right?
Oh yeah, I tried to do this thing. It didn't work well. I was embarrassed. People were probably judging me. I can't do these things anymore.
Right. But you're doing this hard thing and you're not winging it, and it requires your full focus.
Definitely.
And so when you're focused on something and you're not scattered, you're not bouncing all around, you're not winging it, your brain power is going to be directed, your attention and your awareness, two of the speeds of our thought, are focused on one thing, and it's powerful. And so when we do something hard, whether it's an event, taking on some new business challenge, or deadlifting, what's the most you've deadlifted?
Oh, I think 305 or 310,
Okay.
something like that.
Yeah. Were you nervous?
Yeah, I always get nervous about the deadlift.
Okay.
It scares me.
Yeah. And so what do you do? Because it scares you, what do you do? Tell me what you do. How do you set yourself up?
Well, I have put it off a little bit recently, but I focus a lot on trying to get the technique right. I have asked people for help. I've watched videos. I've practiced and, tried different things. I take video of myself so that I can look at my form and post it to show to others. So I mean,
Yes.
I'm trying to get better with it.
Yes. So number one, your awareness is attuned to what's going on. Your awareness of your body, your awareness of your own skill level, your awareness of those around you who might have some advice, some counsel to help you. And then when you're actually doing the deadlift, you're combining that awareness with your attention, and you are getting set up. You're making sure that you're braced, your shoulders are locked back, like all of those things, right? And it's setting you up for success. If you just approach that 305-pound deadlift without those things, without attention, without awareness and focus, and just a mood,
while you're
no,
deadlifting.
you can't. And so, because you would hurt yourself, and that would set you back.
Right.
It would set you back weeks, and it would take you out of the ability to do all of the other things that you enjoy doing: yoga, riding your bike with your kids, all of those things. So we have to think, when we have to do challenging things, and it requires our focus. And that is one of the other costs, that when we're facing our fears, one of the things that prevents us from doing it is the reality that is going to require our focus. It's going to take us away from something that might be easy and gratifying immediately, and take us to something that is going to require our energy and effort and may not pay us off for quite some time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, when you're investing in the real stuff that's going to pay off for your life, it takes a long time for those things to pay off. But if you keep doing it, it's going to pay off in the long term, whether it's your health, relationships, community. I talk about networking a lot. So important for that. You writing this book, we were talking about it right before we started recording. I mean, it seems like based on my social media feed, it's been popular and the launch has gone well, but it's still going to be slow going before you sell tons and tons of copies of this thing. But if you
Yeah.
keep at it, it's going to, I'm sure it's going to catch on because it's great.
Well, thank you, man. I'm not Oprah Winfrey. I don't have an army of millions that are,
And she's
buying
not
my book.
recommending it, right? That's the fast track, right? To
Right.
get on Oprah's list or whatever, right?
But this book, I wrote this book for my kids. Ultimately, my kids are not of the age where the concepts in this book are necessarily going to resonate with them. But I wrote this for my future adult children,
Mm-hmm.
and because I knew that if I did not write this book and I died, then my kids would be worse off, right? So if I didn't sell any books and my kids had this, it would be the greatest gift I could give them, and I was okay with that, you know. But fortunately, you know, it's also resonated out in the broader community, and we've got Navy SEALs reading it, we've got Olympic athletes reading it, we've got um,
But
you know,
you're also not winging it like with the conference, right? I
no,
mean, I've seen the work that you've put into it.
oh
There's been a lot of
yeah,
promotion, getting an early reading team, which I was on, getting an advanced copy, sending it out to people, asking them to post on social media.
yep,
Having a kind of a launch plan, having a publisher, which I think you changed publishers. I know you've gone through some
yeah.
adversity, but you've worked very hard and been intentional about how you release this book versus what a lot of people do is just put stuff out there and expect that someone's going to find it, and they usually don't.
Totally. No, I am definitely that bee in everyone's ear right now as it relates to, because I think that there's a lot of noise in the world right now in
Mm-hmm.
the personal development space. And I believe that this book I know this book is going to be transformational for people that engage with it, not just read it, but there's actually like a workbook journal component built into the story. And I was talking to a guy who's a music artist yesterday who read the book, and he hasn't read a book in 10 years.
Wow.
Uh, and he read this book over the course of a day and a half. And he's like, that whole idea of gifts blew my mind. That's what he told me, and he has to go back and think about how he's perceived his giftedness throughout his career and right now as his music career is changing.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, I'm just a vessel for this message, okay? And if we can all embrace the idea of that we are here to, each and every minute of every day, we are here to facilitate something in a way that's going to positively impact someone else's life. If the whole world were operating at that level, not just trying to get you into their funnel so that they could sell you some sort of a 7-figure course and blah blah blah, and
Hey,
all
that's the whole
promise.
point of this podcast, bro. No, I'm just joking.
Yeah. you know this whole idea of there's this whole world of funneling information and not really making a change in anyone's life, and I'm tired of it.
Yeah.
And um I've done everything wrong on this book according to the way that the only thing I've done right is I've had a book launch, right? And I did it in an organized way. I didn't have some sort of a course that I'm trying to funnel people into on the back end. I don't have a mastermind that I'm upselling people to, which that'll all come at some point.
Yeah.
But I wanted people to resonate with this book, sit with this book, let it marinate with them. I wanted to hammer home this message. And then if people want to engage with it later, then we can, and I'll create something for that. But this book is the product, and it's to remind each and every one of us of what we are capable of becoming if we engage with the hard questions, beginning with who am I.
Yeah. And that question, I keep going back to that question because you also just said we're all here to facilitate something. that will positively impact someone's life. I love that. I know you're doing that with this book, even if it's only your 4 kids, but I think it will be many other people. And, you know, I'm trying to do the same thing with my podcasts and the things I do on social media and all the stuff that I'm, you know, conferences, to help others and inspire others and connect others. And a lot of people are probably not thinking about that, but they may hear that and say, well, yeah, I would love to be able to make an impact for others. I don't know how to do that. I still don't know who I am. So we talked about the importance of going out and doing some hard things and seeing how you react to that. Obviously, reading this book can be helpful. What else can people do? I mean, I think there's a lot of inner work that needs to be done, right? To really discover yourself, figure out your strengths and how you can help others, what you can facilitate.
I think a really powerful question that people can ask themselves that kind of falls under the "Who am I?" section is, what parts of my story do I struggle to own, and why? And really do the work on answering that question. Get into a place where you're silent and you're reflecting on that question, because you will see things happening to you. And you will, not only will you remember events that have happened to you, but you will also remember people that have come into your life that have done something, that have changed the trajectory, and you may have missed it at that time, but now you can go back and you can claim it, right?
Yeah.
And there's a couple of examples of people that I've met on this journey over the last 3 years that have done that, right? I mean, Larry is a great example, actually, of somebody who took his story and owned it, and look what he's created, right? The
This is
Dad's
Larry
Edge,
Hagner, the founder of the Dad Edge podcast and Dad Edge community that we have both
right?
belonged to at different times.
Thousands of people in the big, community,
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of people in the actual mastermind environment, right?
Right.
The alliance environment. And that's a great example. Another example that's totally different is a guy named Alex Boyer. He is a musician. He is originally from Nigeria, but was raised in the UK. And his dream was to be a music artist. And he was, struggling like a lot of artists do. And a lot of it had to do with the way that he was behaving in his own actions. And at one point, he tells this story where he was getting ready to go eat some food out of a trash can,
Hmm.
because he was broke, he was down on his luck, and some stranger came up to him, and as he's pulling this, I think it was a Big Mac or something, out of the trash can, some stranger came up and knocked that hamburger out of his hands and said, "You're better than that.
Hmm.
You deserve more. You're worthy of more. You're better than eating out of the trash can." And it changed him, right? It reminded him of the truth that dwelt within him. And so fast forward, he's this YouTube music star,
Hmm.
and his videos that he's been involved in have been viewed, like, I think at this point, close to 500 million times.
Jeez.
Another person, Christmas Abbott. She is a famous fitness celebrity, and in particular in the CrossFit world, but she's got this whole badass body regiment. And but she wasn't always this fitness celebrity. In fact, at one point she was, she grew up dirt poor, was not living the best lifestyle. She had gone over to Iraq as a civilian contractor, not in the security world, but like basically as a civilian contractor, doing run-of-the-mill activities around the base. And the event that really changed her life was when their base got attacked by mortars, and she was faced with the reality that she did not want to die. And all of a sudden, she recognized that the choices that she was making with her life were shortening it, and she needed to make different choices. Fast forward, she starts this fitness journey. She joins CrossFit. She becomes one of the first NASCAR pit crew members. She has this multi-million-dollar successful fitness brand now, and it's all because she responded to that event, right? We all have the ability in our life to to reflect back and learn from either an event like that that's startled us, or a person coming in and knocking that trash out of our head or out of our hand.
Yeah. What's an example? I'd love to hear an example from your own life. Is it that financial crisis and just kind of where you started drifting from there and hurting relationships?
The personal example for me was January of 2011, where I told my mother to get the F out of my house. And that was because I was in a state of big depression. My youngest son, Charlie, was born in December of 2010. And it was, we were still grappling, even though the markets started to recover in 2009, the world was still grappling with the reality of the financial crisis. Just to give people a little bit of background, I started in the financial world in 2004. I was pretty successful right off the bat. Closed escrow on married my childhood sweetheart, who I've known since we were 9. Bought a house, had money in the bank, a year's worth of income for a rainy day. Was very successful. And then the financial crisis hit. And by October of 2010, we had basically burned through all of the capital that we had in the bank, and I short sold my home, and we went from having 2 kids in August of 2007 to 4 kids by December of 2010, and almost no money, short sale of a home. And I'm just like, my identity is, who am I? I am a failure. I'm not capable of providing. My health, I was at the start of my career, I was like 10% body fat. I was really fit. I blew up to 250 pounds. And was broken mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically. I think mentally, I said already.
Yeah.
It all came to a head in January of 2011 when I told my mother to get out of my house in a less than polite way. She hadn't done anything. My wife approached me and said, "This is not like you. I want you to go talk to somebody." And I said, "Okay, I'll go talk to somebody." And which is hard for men to do.
Yep.
We don't like talking to people.
I don't need help. Right.
We don't like admitting we're vulnerable, but vulnerability is a great sign of strength. Go watch the movie Band of Brothers and see how many times those men put themselves in a vulnerable situation out of love for one of their brothers. And vulnerability is not weakness. Vulnerability is strength. Hiding in the shadows is weakness. And I was not going to hide anymore. And so I went and I talked to a therapist, a psychiatrist by the name of Dr. Jennifer Davis. I've been meeting her quarterly for the last 8 years. At that time, when I first started meeting with her, I was diagnosed with male postpartum depression. How embarrassing is that? I didn't even labor or deliver or carry that child, and I was the one that was diagnosed with postpartum depression.
Wow.
And I didn't even know that was a thing until then. But that opportunity, that crisis, all gave me the chance to sit with myself and to talk with somebody about all of this stuff. Going back to my childhood, to feeling abandoned by my father, my father's still here. I have a good relationship with my father. But he was an Army officer when I was growing up, and as a result of that, he was not around very much. And so I didn't know how to I didn't understand that as a kid. I just saw my dad was not there, and all my friends' dads were. And then my best friend's dad, Earl, was killed by a drunk driver when I was 14. just after my dad had retired from the military and became an entrepreneur, right? So we know that like going
Mm.
from the military to starting a career as an entrepreneur, it's not doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be home at every day at 6 o'clock, right?
Right.
So the one time that my dad came home, and you'll recognize this from the book, and I'm not going to
Yeah.
tell anybody the story. The one time my dad came home from work early, he brought a brand new football home and asked me to go outside to play catch with him. And so I did, and we played catch, and this is the time before cell phones. So my dad had given our landline out to his clients, and my mom came out and said, "Hey, Mike, someone's on the phone for you." And my dad threw me the football and he said, "Stay here, I'll be right back." But he never came back, and my mom called me in for dinner,
Mm.
and I never got to play catch with him, you know. Um, and that was I resented that moment for a long time. It was a big sticking point in our relationship. And but I am a big believer that if we want to, there's a lot of men that we know, and there are men and women that are listening to this episode right now. And if we want healing, if we have wounds from either our father or our mother or some sort of authority figure in our lives, we have to forgive them for their woundedness.
Mm. Because they were
My,
doing
my
the best that they could at the time. It wasn't like
yeah,
intentional, like he felt like he
no,
needed to provide for his family and he had to respond to
right.
this client, right?
And my dad he came from a broken family,
Yeah.
right? Like himself. And he did the best he knew how to do. And he's doing it. And I love my dad. And he is who he is. He's one of the most generous men that I know. Um, and I'm blessed to call him my father. And I'm really glad that that I'm 39 years old and I'm able to say that. Doesn't mean that we get along all the time.
Right.
But I respect him,
But
and
you have a
and
good relationship. You've moved past that. But what you dealt with
right.
is not uncommon at all. I mean, I've met other people with the same thing. I mean, I was at a conference last summer, the Dad Edge Summit, actually, where a friend Dan opened up about how his parents moved him to a different state when he was like 13 or 14. He's always resented them for that because he missed his hometown.
Yeah, you know, and we have the ability. We can that resentment is our choice. We are the ones that. This is why This is why intentionally reflecting on things is very powerful, because I can take that past experience with my dad, and I can either choose to let its energy drive my story, or I can go back. I can direct light and energy onto that thing. I can insert hope there, and I can bring it forward to today and do something different, make a different choice.
Yeah, which you're doing, right? I mean, and writing about it, going back to I forgot what you said exactly earlier, but uh owning that story. What parts of the story do I struggle to own?
Hmm.
I'm finding as I talk to more and more people that the parts of their story that they really struggle to own, in that they're embarrassed about it or they want to suppress it or forget about it, like you just talked about two hard times in your life, the time when your father didn't play catch with you, and then of course the struggles you had after the financial crisis. And it's easy to be embarrassed about those times and never want to talk about them, but not only are they part of who you are today, they actually allowed you to create a better life and a better story for yourself. And by sharing them, you have the power to inspire and help other people. And I think we all have those. And I have mine that I've struggled to own and share as well, either because they're embarrassing or I just don't feel like they're that valuable to people, even though they might be.
Hmm.
And we all have that power if we're willing to own it and share it.
Everybody feels alone, like
Yeah.
alone in their embarrassment, right? I mean, Brene Brown's not the only person that talks about shame, you know, and but she's the one that's got the biggest microphone right now.
Mm.
And it's in particular, it's bringing a lot of it's allowing a lot of women the courage to talk about their shame and vulnerability, right? I'm going to try to be like the male Brene Brown and talk about male vulnerability, and and give men the courage to own their embarrassing moments, or their failures, because in that there's great opportunity. It's
Yep.
easy to own your victories. It's easy to celebrate the wins. It's terrifying to own your losses.
Yeah.
Because it requires you to reflect on where you may have been wrong or not prepared, or done something that benefited your ego and not anything else, right? And so it requires you to get vulnerable with yourself. But guess what, man? Every single person walking around is battling this, is encountering the same things.
I know.
Like, I don't care who they are, like whether it's Tony Robbins or whoever. Like, Tony Robbins is an open book.
Yep.
That's one of the reasons why people relate with him so much.
Oh yeah, his stories are incredible.
But there are so many people who are afraid to open up because of what it might do to their quote unquote brand.
Which I think is the wrong way to go. I mean, I'm all about building an authentic brand. I think that's what people really want. They want to connect with other people and see that they're real. And so I'll join you in this authentic, vulnerable revolution for men, because I think that it's only going to benefit us over time.
Yeah, I think, we could start a vulnerability challenge, a 21-day vulnerability challenge right now on the Andy Storch show.
Yeah.
Where whenever this is going to air, starting on that day and 21 days and 20 days after, we're going to challenge every listener to go on Instagram and Instagram stories and share a vulnerable moment that you've encountered and tag at the Impact Mike. And what's your handle?
Andy_Storch. So at the Impact Mike and Andy_Storch.
Yeah. Tag us. And so we can create a movement where we can be vulnerable together, and therefore you will not be alone.
I love it. You just started a challenge and a movement on my show. This is great. This is awesome. But I love that. And, when this comes out, we'll have to put that out there, and we can take the lead, because we've got to set an example, right? Let's share something, embarrassing, vulnerable, whatever it is, but it made me who I am. And as Gary Vee talks about all the time, own your losses. Don't worry about what other people think about it, because their opinion don't matter. Just own it.
When this airs, Andy, let's do like a quick Facebook Live kicking off this thing, because we can outline where people can go. Men in particular, every man, whether they're not going to admit this, every man has body image issues. Okay. All right. Like, body image is not limited to women. Okay.
No, totally. I know men that deal with this for sure.
Okay. So you have vulnerable body image moments, vulnerable financial failures, all of this stuff, so that we can be vulnerable together and become stronger together.
I love it. And you know what? This scares me a little bit, which means I need to do it, because that's my mantra. Starve your fears. Is something scary. It means I have to do it. There's no way around it. It's got to be done. So Mike, we got to wrap up here. We've talked about your book. We've talked about finding yourself. We've talked about, owning your story. And of course you have shared some of yours, which I think is so inspiring. Is there anything else you want to make sure people take away from this, or what you want people to take away from the book when they read it?
In order for something to be true, it has to be true for all people at all times, everywhere, right? And so at the end of reading this book, Master the Key, you will remember that the truth that you've been seeking has been dwelling within you all along. And that's what I want people to take away from this conversation, and certainly from the book. And they can go to Amazon and they can purchase the book there. They can go to theimpactentrepreneur.net/book. That's impactentrepreneur.net/book. And it will redirect them to Amazon if they don't want to search for it on Amazon. Trying to make things as easy for people as possible. And, continuing, go do something challenging. Go do something physically challenging. It doesn't have to be a 305-pound deadlift like Andy,
Right.
but go do
Or a
something that
tough
you
hike
are
or
afraid
something.
to do. Yeah, get your heart rate going. You know, I mean, like there's actual science behind this to show yourself that you are effective and that you're powerful, and that you put your brain in its place instead of it putting you in some place that you don't want to be.
Yep. Yep. And you owned it. You took a chance. You did something hard. You feel that sense of accomplishment. You can get anything out of life. You can achieve anything if you know yourself, you know your strengths, you have a strong community around you, and you know where you're going, what you're going to do. And it's okay to ask for help. It's great to own your story. Don't worry about being vulnerable, sharing that. We're going to start that challenge today. Mike, it's been awesome to have you on the show. Always love talking to you, my friend. And I love how we support each other so much with where we're going, books, conferences, podcasts, whatever it is. And I know there's just so much more to come, and I'm excited about this book. So if you haven't already and you're listening, make sure you get onto Amazon and buy the book, Master the Key. It's a fantastic read. I highly recommend it. And Mike, thanks again, man. It's been great having you on.
You bet, buddy. Appreciate the opportunity.
All right, take care.